So welcome back to Fight the Burnout. Today we have Adam Davis, ex-retired law enforcement, who now does amazing things around marriage. He runs a master class called, where I lost it. Where is it? He runs a master class that is called Marriage. Bulletproof Marriage. I knew I had it there somewhere. Apologies for that, Adam. But he runs a masterclass, Bulletproof Marriage. He also has been, public speaker on multiple different platforms. But instead of me, as usual, rallying on about what I think I know about you, Adam, I'll let you introduce yourself and tell us what you do, who you are, and a bit of your backstory.
Yep, I appreciate you having me on, man. Thank you so much. It's truly an honor to be able to connect with people of like mind around the world. And I'm, like you said, I'm a former law enforcement officer. Served in patrol, night shift, day shift patrol, traffic homicide investigations, criminal investigations, hostage negotiations, intelligence, just to run the gamut of things there. And I was depending pretty heavy on alcohol to get me through many of the days as I got in, and whenever I traded that out, I found writing was very therapeutic for me. And so today I'm getting ready to release book number 5 in May. It's based on Lieutenant Colonel Grossman's book On Combat. If many of you are familiar with him, he's the author of On Combat and On Killing. And this is called On Spiritual Combat, 30 Missions for Victorious Warfare.
Oh, wow.
And it releases May of 2020, and that'll be book number 5 for me. The last book was, like you were talking about earlier, Bulletproof Marriage, a 90-day devotion. It's a 90-day challenge for first responding military couples. It is it's going to challenge you in about 6 different areas: in communication and issues of trust, conflict resolution, intimacy, and oneness and affirmation. So it's going to challenge you. It's going to pull the best out of you, and it's going to, from what I've heard from the majority of readers, it has helped improve communication greatly, between both spouses. So before that, Behind the Badge, it's a 365-day devotion for law enforcement, released May of 2018. That's still selling every week right now around the world. It's doing really well, and I'm very thankful for those opportunities. But on a side note, Bulletproof Marriage is it was nominated and has been chosen as a finalist out of I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of books, chosen as a finalist for what they call the Evangelical Christian Publishers Association,
Oh, wow.
the Christian Book Awards finalists. So there's 12 different categories, and so Bulletproof Marriage is chosen as a finalist out of 5 finalists, to be chosen as best devotion of the year, and could likely be chosen as best book of the year. We'll find out May the 5th where it lands.
Yeah.
And so that's a tremendous honor for me as a writer, but also to represent law enforcement in such a prestigious way. That is a huge honor, just to be a finalist.
Yeah.
But we're believing that we'll pick up the whole thing and see what happens. But so I've been married this year 20 years, my high school sweetheart, and we got 3 kids, and she homeschools our 3 kids here, and I work remotely. I work from home.
Yeah.
I have a little marketing business, and then I write. I'm working on 2 new books, actually 3, and got a lot of stuff in the works. But the biggest thing that I get out of it is a deep sense of purpose and meaning, because I'm able to take the lessons I learned during my time in law enforcement and invest back into those who still serve, or those who used to serve, who are former law enforcement, and into marriages. So it's a different journey, but it's one that is worth every moment, every minute, and I love everything about it.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. You touched on a few things there. Like, I know most of our listeners are, wanting to be law enforcement, already law enforcement, but there's also a lot of them that, aren't in law enforcement. And the thing that you can, learn from, what you're doing, especially with that, the marriage, Bulletproof Marriage, That's a huge thing. I mean, I know when I was in the police, my wife became the punching bag. Anytime I was going through shit and didn't know what I was going through, she became the emotional punching bag. As sad as it sounds, but she was, that rock and hard place as well for me. But it can relate over into, the corporate world, everything. It's the same stuff. It's just we see different things in law enforcement, and it
Yeah,
hits
and
a
it weighs a toll on you emotionally, and a lot of times our relationships do pay the price.
yeah.
I remember as a rookie being in the patrol briefing room, and a seasoned sergeant come in, and we had an exchange of conversation, and asked if I was married. Told him I'd been married for however many years it was, and he said, "Well, I give it 5 years. Nobody makes it more than 5 years married here on this job." And that's just sort of the mindset of people in law enforcement, is that, hey, this is expected.
Yeah.
So I'm working with groups across the country and different places around the world, trying to raise awareness that, hey, this doesn't have to be the case. You are actually a healthier person when you have a happy, healthy, thriving marriage. And you don't have to just have a marriage that survives. You can have one that's actually, you're enjoying being married,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it makes you a healthier person. But
Oh,
you need to know the tools.
yeah.
You need to know what the tools are, and to be able to use them. So it's I take the mistakes I made and the lessons I learned, and help others.
Yeah, same thing as I do for for the burnout stuff, which we'll get here in a second. But yeah, it's so true. You can have that healthy life. You can have that healthy relationship with your partner, your wife, your husband, because I was going to say that same thing. I know here in New Zealand, the highest, the police has got the highest divorce rate out of any job. I'm like, that's
Yeah,
unacceptable. It doesn't need to be that way, and it's all it does, like you touched in the very beginning, is it is a lot on communication and how to communicate to your partner, because we do see and deal with stuff that no human should ever have to, and you've got to be able to come home and be able to communicate with your partner about stuff that you're seeing and dealing with, so that you guys are on the same page, so she knows if you're a bit snappy one day, she knows why. you know and you can
yeah.
communicate that to her. So yeah, I want to praise you for what you do, man. It's I got emotions going with it, because it was a huge part for me. Yeah, my marriage, we almost broke up a couple times while I was in, because of not having that. So I'm definitely going to get your book. I haven't got it yet, but just after this little talk, I'm going to be getting it, because
Okay,
I
thank
always
you.
need those tools. So yeah. So Adam, you touched a little bit on, you used alcohol a lot during your time in. Um, was that due to anything specific, or was it, would you mind elaborating a little bit on that?
So I remember the first time I come home and my wife asked me when I turned into a fill in the blank. When did you turn into a? We'll just say, for the sake of cleanliness, a jerk. And it was sort of a wake up call to a degree.
Mm,
I'd come home, take off my gear, and there was no line drawn between how I talked to people on the street or how I talked to my wife. She was essentially, she'd become my enemy, because everybody was my enemy. I pushed everybody away,
mm,
just as a response to everything you see. Not necessarily one particular call. It's just the whole body of work. And after so long, it feels like you've got people coming at you from the streets. You got people coming at you from admin. You got people coming at you from society and social media. And I mean, it feels like you're essentially pissing in the wind. There's a losing battle.
mm.
But for me, I got to the point where that was sort of my outlet, and never abusive or harmful. I just shut down and isolated myself, and it was a coping mechanism. All it was a way for me to deal with the stuff I had going on the inside
Mm.
that I didn't really know how to process or deal with. And that's a lot of it. We got to learn how to deal with those things. We train a lot on how to survive, how to win every fight, every battle,
Mm.
but we don't necessarily always get the tools for, or not back in the day, but how we get the tools for how to process it after the fact.
Mm.
And you know, I'm not trying to say that, you know, drinking alcohol is bad or it's wrong, but drinking as much as I was drinking was wrong. It's unhealthy. But
Yeah.
you know, it's there's got to be a balance. And when you talk about burnout, when you lose your identity, it's easy to find yourself in burnout because your identity isn't tied to the badge or the shield or whatever you call it wherever you're listening. It's not tied to your occupation. It doesn't matter if you're law enforcement or you're CEO of a Fortune 500 company. That's not who you are.
Mm.
That's the call you chose to answer, and rightfully so and honorably so. But your identity is not tied in that. Your identity is tied in something much greater and something much deeper. And for me, that was a relationship with God and having a faith that ran deep. Even though in the beginning I saw things a little differently. But it took me through the places where I relied on alcohol as a place where I could find a temporary peace, a temporary comfort that did not last,
Mm.
and ultimately led me down a pretty dark path. But you know, I try to remember the lessons I learned and take the pains that I remember and turn it into something that somebody that's going through it right now can use.
Mm. Yeah.
But yeah, it was just a temporary comfort that did not pay good dividends at all.
Yeah, I mean, and I know so many people, you know, if they're in law enforcement or they're wanting to get in, I know so many people. I know when I was in law enforcement, I never went to alcohol, but I went to doing, like, I was all in an adrenaline junkie, like we were talking about before we started recording. You know,
Oh yeah.
I grew up sailing around the world. So, you know, my dad was into rock climbing. He and my uncle started up Yates gear, which you might be familiar with. They sell a lot of stuff to law enforcement, SWAT teams.
Oh
But
yeah.
my dad stole out of that. So, but we still did rock climbing, paragliding, all that. So I was adrenaline junkie. So I started seeking adrenaline. I had a motorcycle at the time. I found myself doing stupid stuff, like, you know, seeing how fast I could get my sports bike to go on the rural roads. You know, so yeah, mine was probably more dangerous than drinking, um, but it's the same thing. You know, we all find it. But I know so many law enforcement that they go straight to the bottle. They go home and they have to have a couple beers before just to debrief down before they can go home. And I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing, but it can turn, like you said, it can turn dark because we don't have any other outlet, or we might feel like we can't come home. I know I felt like I couldn't come home and tell my wife that I'd just been to a guy who'd been dead and, you know, had been you know, had the shit kicked out of him or whatever it was, you know, had to tell a 16-year-old girl that her dad committed suicide. Um, yeah. And so, yeah, we do find those outlets. So, you know, I want to, you know, well done on identifying that and, you know, coming out of it. What would you identify, just so we have a clear kind of definite, what would you identify burnout as for yourself? Like, what does it look like for you?
Are you talking about the symptoms or my personal definition?
Definition and your symptoms, just so that, you know, listeners can relate. You know, if they feel, you know, if you're saying what you feel your symptoms are, then they can
Hmm.
actually go, oh, actually, I'm feeling some of that.
So, and I can just tell you from a personal experience for me, it gets to the point to where you no longer enjoy what you do. You find yourself complaining about stuff more than you do talking about what you're grateful for. You talk about your chronic fatigue is, you know, you're just tired. You don't really want to go in. You don't want to do the work. You're no longer proactive. Just an overall sour attitude. Those are just a few of the things. And but the description for me is you forgot why you're here. You forgot what you were doing. You forgot why you answered the call. You forgot why you responded to the call. You forgot why you're here. You lose sight of your purpose. You lose sight of your identity, and you've allowed all the negative things around you to affect the passion that you once had. And so that burnout can be applicable to your career in law enforcement. It can be applicable to any career. It could be applicable to your relationship. You know, and whatever it is, it can be. It applies to anything. But what we have to do to keep that from occurring, what I had to do was to find a balance. And even now, as an author, or as a business owner, as a speaker, a consultant, coach, whatever hat I wear, at whatever point I'm given, it's finding that balance. and that balance is, it's not always easy, but it requires intentional effort and a daily practice of gratitude, and sort of refocusing our minds and everything that we are on why we answer the call, why we're doing what we're doing. Don't forget the why.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to become jaded or cynical and hard about the things that are going on around you, but don't let the things that are going on around you affect who you are and why you answered and how you're going to respond going forward. Yesterday, that may have been the fact for you. That may be the case today, but you can make a conscious, intentional decision to move forward in a healthier way, remembering, number one, why you answered the call, number two, why you're here, what your purpose is, number three, how you're going to go forward with a better attitude and practicing daily habit of gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's important to keep those things sort of front and center, and not get lost in the deep dark abyss of complaining and burnout is a real thing. It's very real, but and I think it's a choice. There's a slippery slope. You start complaining one day, and it's an attitude. It's a mindset. You have to have a mindset that you're not going to go down that path.
Mm. And, it's actually, I don't know about you if you saw it in your department, but I know where I was working when I first started, it was real easy to get tied up in that because everybody's in it. Everybody's talking about the negatives and that. Like, you don't, I didn't see in the beginning a lot of people talking, oh, I did this awesome thing. Like we've got a thing here called Jug Session. And it's a book where you put all the stupid shit that people did, that you work with in the book, and then you get together and you drink and you have to do a vessel for every stupid thing that you did.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
It,
I looked at the time, I was like, yeah, it's us getting together. And then after the first one, I was like, I don't want to go to these anymore because it just makes me feel like crap. And if I look back on
yeah.
it, the best thing that we could do is actually put all the good things that are in there and then praise, get together and praise everybody for them. That'd be a much better, constructive thing. But it is, that is difficult. When you were in law enforcement, at what stage did you realize, oh, I'm actually, whatever it was that you've realized, oh, this is actually not healthy, or, that you were burned out or anything. And what'd you do to kind of counter it? Or, what ended up happening?
for me, when I realized it was the day that I was probably the day I was ready to take my life. It was Sunday, working some overtime, and I'd been sort of having this internal match with, and basically interrogating God and the reality of His goodness and love. I grew up in a home where my mom, after my parents' divorce, she remarried a guy who was a pastor and a preacher and of a Christian church, and so I grew up trying to live up to a set of rules and regulations and laws that I felt like that was the reality of who God was and the way I saw Him, and that just wasn't it. That didn't work for me, and so as I got into law enforcement, I turned those other things, alcohol, all the other stuff, and it led me to a point to where I was completely hopeless and such a bleak outlook on life. And for me, that moment led me to a day that I'm thankful that things went the way they did. I felt like be better off dead. I mean, everything was just bad. I mean, it was just horrible attitude, horrible mindset, horrible outlook on life, and had some really legitimate negative things going on in my life personally. And but I had to accept responsibility for that stuff. I had to be the one who took it on my shoulders and said, you know what, I got to work through this. And so in that day, I had it was a decision. A decision to take my life or give it away, and I chose to give it away and surrender everything I had to God, and acknowledge that I didn't have to have all the answers regarding faith, but I knew that what I'd been doing wasn't working. And from that point, things began to change. I had a massive encounter that day with a love like I've never experienced before in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been my mission from that day forward to help other people encounter that love and experience that love in a way that they can recognize and they'll see. Because I know I don't have to go around, and I'm not a preacher, but I do go around and I try to deal hope, and I try to deal love in a way that people get it, they understand it, they accept it, receive it, and it changes their life. I didn't experience a massive change overnight, but what I did was it changed my appetite for things. It changed my desire for things. It changed my perspective on life. It changed everything about who I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And that led me to stop drinking every night and start writing. And so writing became a form of therapy for me. And so I was writing stuff and nobody ever read it and keeping it to myself. And one night that it was shortly after the events in Ferguson unfolded, the media was bombarding law enforcement and all negative. And I come home and, sat down, took my gear off, and I was like, who's going to speak life to law enforcement? Who's going to speak good to them? Who's going to say anything positive? Is there anybody? And I felt compelled to write a book, and so I wrote and self-published my first book, and it was called Spirit and Truth. And it was 52 devotions for law enforcement, and that created an opportunity for a publisher to discover me and give me a contract for Behind the Badge, and ultimately Bulletproof Marriage on Spiritual Combat, and then the third unannounced book Colonel Grossman and I are working on. And so it started with one decision at a fork in the road, so to speak, and from there things began to change radically. I went into law enforcement with the plan and intention to do it for the rest of my life and retire, climb as high as I could and get as many bars and stars and whatever I could get on me as I could. And it just, the mission is still the same. I'm just doing it in a different capacity.
Yeah.
And with a different authority behind me. So it's, it's worth it. And you're going to experience change when you make those decisions, when you experience a shift in your mindset, when you make a conscious decision to be grateful every day and literally sit down and write down what I'm grateful for today. It changes the way you see things. So that was the point for me and how I responded to it. And man, I'm thankful I did.
Yeah, no, I can fully relate to that one, man. I had some similar things. Same thing. I remember the whole Ferguson thing. I was in the depths of the police at the time and all that. And I was like, I'm being attacked from every direction. My people in the States are getting attacked. The blue are getting attacked. And that was where there's some other incidents. My female partner got assaulted in that. And I was like, the guy didn't get enough. And I was focused on all those things. But then that all started happening. I was like, I did. I went down that dark cycle like you talked about as well. And yeah, mine was the same thing. Mine was I almost cheated on my wife, and I saw what it did to my parents, and I was like, what the hell is going on with me? And that was my turning point. So yeah, now I want to, thanks for sharing that story, man, because I know that's going to resonate with a lot of people. And especially people that are, feeling, I know a lot of my old colleagues, they talk to me all the time about, that darkness and stuff and having to fight it and that. So that'll give them some really good tips. What would for people getting into law enforcement, what would be your preventative tools for them to help prevent them from ever, experiencing that? Because we don't want anybody to experience that. And so what would be some of your top tools for them to help prevent that?
Having the proper mindset going in, understanding that, all right, you're going to set the boundaries up front. If you're already married, you're going to have the conversations up front. I believe Bulletproof Marriage and the work that Colonel Grossman and I have done on this is an essential resource for anybody that's going into law enforcement, especially, obviously if you're married. But having those conversations that, hey, this is what we can expect. And, reading the books like on combat, on killing, doing the studies, preparing yourself for after action. We're prepared for before action, but having that solid mindset, invest in developing your mindset to become a resilient mindset, become a resilient person, and create the habits and don't get away from them when things get crazy. Stick to it, and just get you a rhythm. And like Marcus Luttrell, my friend, says, he's all the time, you got to find your battle rhythm. Find your battle rhythm. Once you find your battle rhythm, then you're good. You got to find that stride. You got to find the how you're gonna fight battle, and that's what you got to do every day in life. But you got to be willing to set the standard and say, you know what, this relationship, is not disposable, and I can't just quit on it and pick up another one because it affects so many people. It's
Mhm.
not just me involved, and be willing to make the necessary sacrifices personally to take care of yourself, of your family, so that you can be a better law enforcement officer wherever you serve.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. And that, and for those that aren't law enforcement, to be, a great executive or, just whatever it is that, line of work that you're in. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
so Adam, you've touched on it already a little bit, but about why and purpose. But I'm a huge why guy. Like what I've realized since I left the job is that I didn't have my why was so surface level that I lost sight of it quite quickly. Whereas now I know my true why, which is, I don't want anybody else to go through the pain or suffering that I did or my family did. So what would you say that your why is, that keeps you driving hard through those easy times and also through those hard times?
The biggest why is because I realize the power of the word. I realize the power of words, and I know that the work I've done has had an impact on people, and I know that there's a better way. But I also know where a lot of people are, and that abyss of darkness is just a swell that'll swallow you up,
Mm.
and it'll take you over before you can. You underestimate it, and by the time you're in it, you seem like you can't get out. And so I know that there's a better way. So my why is based on a perspective not tied to our natural life. It's tied to eternity. It's tied to a bigger picture, and understanding that one day the life that we have here will end. Careers will end. We will stop breathing. Our hearts will stop beating. And whenever they lower us in the box, in the ground, what matters? What really matters? And what really matters is how we invest and how we love, how we invest in other people, how we love people, and the legacy we define. And when you say something about legacy is my purpose, it sounds so cliche, but I want my legacy to be love, and I want it to be compassion and empathy, and I don't want to be something to that means that I cared about other people and I wanted them to have a better future. I
Mm.
wanted them to have a life that was more than just a life that they survived. I don't want them to get to eternity and with a bunch of stitches and casts and crutches and walk in limping. I want you to go in thriving,
Mm.
and just to realize your purpose, to realize that there's more to this life than just getting by,
Mm.
and help them discover a bigger picture and find a source to believe in that'll change everything.
Oh, that's deep, man. No, that's really, yeah. I like that, and you can see it. It drives you. It drives you really well with everything that you've done and accomplished and overcome. So if there was some, say you were talking to somebody who didn't know what their why was or what their purpose was, what advice would you give them to, help figure it out?
There's only one person who knows what it is, and you
Mm.
just have to be still. I remember uh, towards the end of my time in law enforcement, I had a couple of mentors, couple of coaches, and I had a man who's a very wise man. He's written multiple books, great man and a great mentor, great friend. And he said, what you're seeking is already inside of you.
Mm.
And when you realize that what you're seeking isn't on the outside, it's on the inside. The peace that you seek is not found on the outside, it's found on the inside. The purpose you seek is not found on the outside, it's on the inside. No career, no occupation, no hobby, no relationship can fulfill that void that's on the inside
Mm.
without the proper source. And so, discovering your purpose, discovering your why, requires you to be still and silence all the voices around you. Stop listening to everybody, be still, and get focused on why you responded
Mm.
and why you responded to the call, why you answered the call. And
Mm.
so those are in general, I think that we could probably talk hours and hours and hours on that one point alone, is how to discover your why, how to discover your purpose. And it's all tied to a bigger picture. And I think ultimately for me, my true purpose is to love God and love other people as I love myself. And too often we try to get things backwards. We try to love other people, and it's tied to a surface level emotion and not tied to the realization of the power of what true love is. And the book of John in the New Testament of the Bible says, "Greater love has no man than giving his life for his own brother."
Mm,
Paraphrasing, obviously. And Jesus did that for me. And so we have to be completely selfless in the way we love. And too often,
mm,
I found myself willing to give my life for anybody I fought for on the street. I'd give it for my brothers or sisters any day. I'd give it for a stranger. But when
mm,
it come to my marriage, I just wasn't willing to be that selfless. And
mm,
so we have to get our priorities in line. So I think step one to discover your purpose and your why is to understand the proper alignment of priorities. And when you get your when you get your priorities in alignment, then you'll begin to see what your why is and what your purpose is, because then you'll begin to see what your divine gift is, what God has gifted you with on the inside, because He's given every single person who walks this planet a deposit, a gift. And we have to take the time to understand and discover that gift and then become masters of the gift and then find the proper outlets of where we're going to use that gift. For the sheepdog, the gift is being willing to walk in love, but being also willing to stand up against the wolf and say that today's not the day. You're not going to do it on my clock, not on my watch. And
mm,
you draw a line in the sand, but it's all driven by love. So whatever you do, do it in love. And understanding your why is not something I think we could probably in depth answer in this episode, but I think that that's a good start. Is looking at the gifts that you have, looking at what you're passionate about, looking at your priorities and getting them in proper alignment, and then starting to take some next steps, develop daily habits on how you're going to achieve those goals. For me, it was, set some 20-year goals, set some 15-year goals, some 10 years, some 5 years, some 1 year, 6 months, 30 days. What I'm going to do in the next 30 days. Now, how I'm going to work backwards. What am I going to do today, every minute of every day? What I'm going to do to work towards accomplishing the goals I have for the next month, the next 6 months, the next year, 5 or 10 years. How am I going to achieve those things? And too often we go through life aimlessly, and
mm,
then 15 years in, we're miserable and we don't understand why.
mm.
So take the time now to get yourself aligned, get your mind focused, get your priorities set up, get your belief system set up, change your mindset, and then set you some daily habits, some daily routines, some good ones, some healthy ones, and start charging towards those goals, and you'll find your purpose.
That's some great, yeah, that's some real great advice. I so wish I had, I know that stuff now, but I so wish somebody had told me that stuff 10 years ago. And I'm sure somebody did, I just didn't listen.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, no, that's some really good stuff. So, getting towards the end of, this episode, if somebody's looking for bulletproof marriage, or they're looking for other stuff that you wrote, or looking for you, how can they get in touch?
A couple of different ways. You can go to my website. It's theadamdavis.com, theadamdavis.com. Everything I have is listed on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any retailer. You just type in Bulletproof Marriage Adam Davis, Behind the Badge Adam Davis, on Spiritual Combat. All that's listed there. I'm on social media. On Facebook as The Official Adam Davis, and on Instagram as Adam Davis Official. And I would certainly love to connect with your audience if they so inclined.
Awesome, man. Thanks for that. The last question I like to ask is, what would be the one thing you would tell our viewers or listeners to help prevent or counter burnout? The one thing, your top piece of advice.
Yep. So, top piece of advice is to have the daily habits, to have margin in your time for rest, to have margin in your time to do things that are not work related, to have be scheduled and create a place of balance. In order to have balance, you have to have some boundaries. And if you want to have the boundaries, then you have to establish those, because if you don't, somebody else will. And so you have to understand what you're going to do and get your priorities right. And so I think number one thing is establish the boundaries. and get that balance through daily habits.
Awesome, man. Thanks for that. Thanks again, Adam, for being on the show. I learned a lot. I know the viewers have learned a lot. And yeah, so for all you out there that are listening, make sure you subscribe. Put on those notifications so when a new episode every Friday New Zealand time comes out, you can hear from people like Adam, people from all walks of life. Not just law enforcement, but also we try and interview anybody that wants to get on the show, because we want to hear from everybody how they get through burnout, how they prevent it, how they overcome it, and hear their stories and their whys. So again, Adam, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And yeah, till next time, guys. Remember, my motto is train hard, test easy, and that goes for both physically and mentally.